Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Silas Brightwater and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2011, when the missing person case of Ava Marsh turned into something that still haunts me every time I close my eyes. The leaves were turning that October, painting the mountainsides in violent reds and dying golds. There's something about autumn in the Smokies that makes the forest feel alive in ways that unsettle even someone like me, who spent more than a decade walking these trails. Maybe it's the way the fog rolls in thick and gray between the trees, or how the darkness comes creeping in by 5 in the afternoon, swallowing the mountains whole. The animals behave strangely too. Deer standing motionless in clearings, watching you with eyes that seem too intelligent, too knowing. I should have paid attention to those signs. Should have trusted the crawling sensation between my shoulder blades that had been growing stronger with each passing day. But I was too focused on the case, too determined not to fail again. Ava Marsh had been missing for 3 days when I got the call. 23 years old, graduate student in wildlife photography from the University of Tennessee. She'd been documenting nocturnal animal behavior for her thesis, camping alone near Cataract Falls. Her advisor hadn't heard from her since Tuesday, and when her scheduled check-in call never came Wednesday morning, he'd contacted the Park Service. I remember the metallic taste of instant coffee in my mouth as I reviewed her file that Thursday morning. The visitor center felt too warm, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. Eva's photograph showed a young woman with serious dark eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked competent, prepared, not the type to make rookie mistakes in the wilderness. Single female, experienced hiker, familiar with the area, I muttered to myself, making notes on the incident report. Equipment includes professional camera gear, camping supplies, GPS unit, emergency beacon. What bothered me was that her emergency beacon hadn't been activated. In my experience, people in real trouble always trigger their beacons unless they're physically unable to do so. The implications of that sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the October morning air. I'd been assigned as lead on the search because of my experience with missing persons cases. What the Park Service didn't advertise was that I'd worked 14 missing person cases in my 12 years here. 13 of them had been resolved successfully. The 14th still woke me up at night. Cold sweat soaking through my uniform shirt as I remembered the small hiking boots we'd found by Abrams Creek, and the little girl who'd never made it home. The trail to Cataract Falls winds through dense hardwood forest, the kind that swallows sound and makes even familiar paths feel alien. I started my search at the designated camping area, where Eva had supposedly set up her base camp. The site was undisturbed, tent still standing, sleeping bag neatly rolled, camp stove clean and packed away. Her car, a blue Honda Civic, sat in the parking area with her spare camera equipment locked in the trunk. But something felt wrong about the campsite. Too neat, too perfect. In my experience, when people leave camp for day hikes, they leave behind small signs of life. A coffee cup by the fire ring, a book left open on the picnic table, clothes hanging from a line. Eva's site looked like a display in an outdoor gear catalog. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Ranger Brightwater at Cataract Falls. Campsite located and secured. Beginning trail search now. Copy that, Brightwater. Weather Service is calling for fog moving in around 1400 hours. Keep us posted. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the static, reminding me that I wasn't truly alone out here. But as I shouldered my pack and started up the trail, the weight of solitude pressed down on me like a physical thing. The first mile of trail was routine. I followed standard search protocols, checking for disturbed vegetation, looking for signs that someone had left the marked path. The forest was unusually quiet. No bird calls, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just the whisper of wind through dying leaves and the crunch of my boots on the trail. It was at the first creek crossing that I found her first camera. The Nikon D90 lay partially submerged in the shallow water, its lens cap floating a few feet downstream. I retrieved it carefully, noting the way the camera strap had been cut, not torn, cut. Clean slices through the nylon material that spoke of a very sharp blade. My hands were shaking as I examined the camera, though I told myself it was just the cold. The LCD screen was cracked, but when I turned it on, it still functioned. I scrolled through the last photos Eva had taken, my stomach growing tighter with each image. The early photos were exactly what I'd expected from a wildlife photography student. Detailed shots of deer tracks in mud, a great horned owl perched on a dead branch, the intricate patterns of frost on fallen leaves. But the timestamps showed these had been taken on Monday, the day after she'd arrived. The last photo was taken Tuesday evening at 8:47 p.m. It showed the Cataract Falls trail marker, the same one I'd passed an hour earlier. But something in the background made my blood run cold. Behind the wooden sign, barely visible in the camera's flash, was a figure. A man in dark clothing, standing among the trees about 30 yards back. The image was too blurry to make out details, but I could see that he was facing the camera. Facing Eva. I keyed my radio with numb fingers. Base, this is Brightwater. Found evidence at Creek Crossing, mile marker 2.3. Requesting backup and crime scene team. Copy, Brightwater. Nature of evidence? I stared at the photograph, at the dark figure watching Eva from the shadows. Possible foul play. Victim's camera shows evidence of third-party involvement. The radio crackled with static for a long moment before the dispatcher's voice came through, more serious now. Backup is en route. Estimated arrival 30 minutes. Do not proceed alone. But I was already moving up the trail, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain. In the photograph, the figure had been behind the trail marker. That meant he'd been following Eva, staying out of sight but close enough to watch her every move. A predator tracking his prey. The trail grew steeper as it climbed toward the falls, winding through stands of maple and oak that had turned the color of old blood. Fog was beginning to seep between the trees, earlier than the Weather Service had predicted. It moved with an unnatural quality, flowing uphill against the wind, pooling in hollows like spilled milk. I found the second camera at mile marker 3.1, this one deliberately placed on a fallen log beside the trail. It was her backup camera, a smaller Canon that she'd apparently been using for candid shots. The strap on this one was intact, but the camera had been turned off and the memory card was missing. Someone had wanted me to find it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a random attack or a crime of opportunity. Someone had been watching Eva, studying her patterns, waiting for the right moment. And now they were playing games with me, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow. I thought about the 14 missing persons cases I'd worked, about the patterns I'd learned to recognize. Serial predators often kept trophies from their victims, jewelry, clothing, personal items. But this felt different. This felt personal. My radio crackled with static as I tried to contact base. Base, this is Brightwater. Radio check. Nothing but white noise. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Base, this is Ranger Brightwater requesting radio check. Still nothing. The fog was thicker now, turning the forest into a maze of gray shadows and half-seen shapes. I checked my GPS unit, but the screen showed only an error message. The thick canopy and heavy weather must have been interfering with the satellite signal. For the first time in my career, I was truly alone in the wilderness. I continued up the trail, my hand resting on the grip of my service weapon. The silence was oppressive now, broken only by the distant sound of falling water. The fog muffled everything, making it impossible to judge distances or directions. Familiar landmarks disappeared into the gray, and I found myself relying on the trail markers to navigate. At mile marker 3.8, I found Eva's backpack. It hung from a low branch about 10 feet off the trail, swaying gently in the breeze. The pack had been opened, and its contents scattered on the ground below. Notebooks, film canisters, energy bars, and a small first aid kit. But what made my skin crawl was the way it had been displayed, arranged almost like a shrine or offering. As I approached the scattered gear, I noticed something else that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the soft earth, 2 sets of tracks leading away from the trail. One set was small, about size 7, probably Eva's hiking boots. The other was larger, size 11 or 12, with a distinctive tread pattern that looked like work boots. The tracks led directly into the dense forest, away from the trail and toward the sound of falling water. I knew I should wait for backup, should follow protocol and establish a perimeter. But something deep in my gut told me that Eva was running out of time, if she was even still alive. I followed the tracks. The forest grew denser as I moved away from the maintained trail, the fog so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. The tracks were easy to follow in the soft earth, but they told a story that made my stomach churn. Eva's footprints showed signs of stumbling, uneven spacing that suggested she'd been forced to move quickly. The larger tracks stayed consistently behind hers, the stride pattern of someone herding their prey. I'd been following the trail for maybe 20 minutes when I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my body stand up. A woman's voice, calling from somewhere ahead in the fog. "Help me. Please, somebody help me." It was Eva's voice, I was certain of it. The same tone I'd heard on the voicemail her advisor had played for me, the same slight Tennessee accent. She was alive and she was in trouble. I broke into a run, crashing through the underbrush toward the sound of her voice. Branches clawed at my uniform, and the fog seemed to press against me like a living thing. My boots slipped on wet leaves and hidden roots, but I kept running toward the voice. "Help me, he's coming back." The voice was closer now, maybe 50 yards ahead. I could hear the falls more clearly too, the thunder of water dropping over the cliff face. I was almost to the base of Cataract Falls, in a part of the park that few visitors ever saw, the perfect place to hide a body. I burst through a wall of fog into a small clearing beside the falls. The water cascaded down the rock face in a silver curtain, filling the air with mist and the deafening roar of falling water, and there, sitting on a fallen log with her back to me, was Ava Marsh. She was alive, apparently unharmed, still wearing her hiking clothes and boots. Her auburn hair was disheveled, and her shoulders shook as if she were crying. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by confusion. If she was here, safe, then who had been leaving the cameras for me to find? "Ava," I called out, my voice barely audible over the sound of the falls. "Ava, it's okay. I'm a park ranger." She turned toward me and I saw her face for the first time. It was definitely her, the same serious dark eyes, the same features from her photograph. But something was wrong. Her expression was blank, emotionless, like a doll's face. "You found me," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the sound of the falls. "I knew you would." I approached her slowly, my hand still resting on my weapon. Something about her manner set off every alarm bell in my head. She was too calm, too composed for someone who'd been missing for 3 days. "Ava, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine. Perfectly fine. He took very good care of me." "Who took care of you? Who's he?" Her smile widened, showing too many teeth. "You know who. You've been following his trail all day. He's been watching you, Silas. He knows all about you." The use of my first name made my blood run cold. I hadn't introduced myself, and my name tag just read Brightwater. How did she know my first name? "Eva, we need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" She stood up from the log, moving with a fluid grace that seemed wrong somehow. "Oh, I can walk. I've been walking all day, actually. Following you, making sure you found all the clues." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The cameras, the backpack, the too neat campsite. It had all been staged, and Eva, or whoever this was, had been watching me the entire time. "You're not Eva," I said, my hand moving to my weapon. "Of course I'm Eva," she said, tilting her head at an unnatural angle. "I have her memories, her voice, her face, but I'm so much more now. He made me better." I drew my service weapon, a Glock 22 that suddenly felt inadequate in my hands. "Where is the real Ava Marsh?" "She's right here," the thing wearing Eva's face said. "She's watching through my eyes, screaming in my mind. Would you like to hear her?" The voice that came from Eva's mouth was different now, higher, more desperate. "Please help me. He's inside my head. He's been inside my head for days." Then it was back to that calm, emotionless tone. "She's been very entertaining. Her memories are particularly vivid. Did you know she was afraid of the dark? Such a useful fear to work with." I backed away slowly, keeping the weapon trained on her. "What are you?" "I'm exactly what you think I am, Silas. What you've been hunting for 12 years without knowing it. The one who took little Sarah Maddox by Abrams Creek. The one who's been watching you ever since, waiting for the right moment." The mention of Sarah's name hit me like a physical blow. The 8-year-old girl who disappeared during my second year as a ranger. The case that had haunted me. The one failure that had driven me to work every missing person case with desperate determination. "You killed Sarah." "I gave her a gift," the thing said. "The same gift I gave Eva. The same gift I'm going to give you." It was then that I noticed the other figure emerging from the fog behind Ava. A man in dark clothing, tall and lean, moving with predatory grace. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 50, with graying hair and eyes that reflected the light like an animal's. "Hello, Silas," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." I swung my weapon toward him. But Ava, or the thing wearing her face, moved with inhuman speed. She was on me before I could react, her fingers closing around my wrist with crushing force. The gun fired once, the shot going wide before she twisted my arm and sent the weapon tumbling into the falls. Now, the man said, approaching slowly. "There's no need for violence. We're all friends here." Up close, I could see the details that the photograph had hidden. His face was deeply lined, weathered by years of outdoor living. His clothes were old but well-maintained, the kind of practical outdoor gear that doesn't draw attention, but it was his eyes that made my skin crawl. Intelligent, calculating, completely without empathy. "You're the one who's been taking people," I said, struggling against Eva's grip. Her fingers felt like steel cables, far stronger than any human should be. "Taking is such an ugly word," he said. "I prefer to think of it as recruiting, building a family. Ava was lonely, you see. She needed companions. And well, you've been searching for me for so long. It seems only fair that you get to join us." "What did you do to her?" He smiled, and I saw that his teeth were filed to points. "The same thing I'm going to do to you. It's a beautiful process, really. The consciousness remains intact, but the will belongs to me. They see everything, feel everything, but they can't control anything. They become perfect puppets." Eva's grip tightened on my wrist, and I felt the bones grinding together. "He's been practicing," she said in that hollow voice. "Getting better at it. Sarah was his first real success, but she was just a child. Adult minds are more complex, more resistant. It took him years to perfect the technique." "Where is she? Where's Sarah?" "She's close by," the man said. "She's been helping me scout new victims. Such a good girl. She never ages, never grows up. She'll be 8 years old forever." Horror washed over me in waves. Not just that Sarah was dead, but that she was still conscious, still aware, trapped in her own body while this monster used her as a tool. "You're insane," I said. "Am I? I've conquered death, Silas. I've found a way to preserve consciousness beyond the grave. My followers will exist forever, serving me throughout eternity. How is that insane?" I tried to break free from Eva's grip, but she was impossibly strong. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a modified cattle prod. But instead of electrical contacts, it had thin metal probes that gleamed in the dim light. "This won't hurt," he said. "Well, it will hurt quite a bit, actually, but the pain is temporary. The servitude is eternal." As he approached with the device, I did the only thing I could think of. I used Eva's grip on my wrist as leverage and threw myself backward, pulling her with me toward the edge of the falls. If I was going to die, I wasn't going to let them turn me into whatever they'd turned Ava into. We tumbled together toward the water, but Ava released me at the last second, her survival instincts overriding her master's commands. I hit the pool at the base of the falls alone, the icy water driving the breath from my lungs. The current was stronger than I'd expected, fed by recent rains. It pulled me under, spinning me around until I didn't know which way was up. My lungs burned as I fought my way to the surface, gasping for air and struggling to stay afloat. When I finally managed to grab onto a rock and pull myself partially out of the water, I could see the man and Ava standing at the edge of the falls, looking down at me. They made no move to come after me, just watched with that same emotionless expression. "You can't run forever, Silas," the man called down. "I know these woods better than you do. I know where you live, where you work, where you buy your groceries, and I have all the time in the world." I hauled myself out of the water and started running. The fog was so thick I could barely see where I was going, but I didn't dare stop. Behind me, I could hear them moving through the forest, not hurried but relentless. They were hunting me now, and I was unarmed, disoriented, and alone. My radio was dead, soaked through from the fall. My GPS unit was gone, lost somewhere in the water. I had no way to call for help, no way to navigate except by following the sound of the creek downstream. If I could make it back to the main trail, I might have a chance. But the fog seemed to be getting thicker and the sound of the water was confusing, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches catching at my wet uniform, my boots slipping on wet leaves. That's when I heard the child's voice. "Mr. Silas? Is that you?" I froze, my heart pounding. I knew that voice. I'd heard it on the search tapes in the interviews with her parents. Sarah Maddox, 8 years old, missing for 12 years. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm lost, Mr. Silas. Can you help me find my way home?" The voice was coming from somewhere ahead, deeper in the fog. I knew it was a trap, knew that the thing wearing Sarah's body was trying to lure me in, but I also knew that somewhere inside that small form was the consciousness of a little girl who'd been trapped for 12 years. "I'm here, Sarah," I called back. "I'm coming to help you." I moved toward the voice, pushing through the fog like a drowning man swimming toward the surface. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths appearing and disappearing, familiar landmarks becoming strange and alien. "I'm scared, Mr. Silas. He says I have to hurt you, but I don't want to. I just want to go home." The voice was closer now, maybe 20 feet ahead. I could see a small shape in the fog, a child-sized figure standing motionless among the trees. As I got closer, I could make out details: a pink jacket, blonde hair and pigtails, small hiking boots. It was Sarah, exactly as she'd looked in the photographs from 12 years ago. She hadn't aged a day. "Sarah, it's okay," I said, approaching slowly. "I'm here to help you." She turned toward me and I saw her face. It was definitely Sarah, but her eyes were wrong, ancient, knowing, filled with an intelligence that no 8-year-old should possess. "He's coming," she said in that little girl voice. "He's always coming. He never stops. And when he gets you, you'll understand. You'll see what I see, feel what I feel, but you won't be able to stop it. Fight him, Sarah. I know you're in there. Fight him." For just a moment, her expression changed. The ancient intelligence flickered and I saw something else. Genuine fear, genuine hope. The real Sarah still trapped inside. "Help me," she whispered. "Please. I've been trying to fight him for so long, but I'm so tired. I can't." Her face went blank again, and when she spoke, it was in the man's voice coming from a child's mouth. "She's been very useful, my little Sarah. So innocent looking, so trustworthy. Parents let their guards down around children. She's helped me collect quite a few new friends over the years." "You're a monster," I said. "I'm evolution," Sarah's mouth said. "I'm the next step in human development, and soon you'll be part of it too." The fog swirled around us and I could hear footsteps approaching from multiple directions. Eva's voice came from somewhere to my left, the man's from somewhere to my right. They were surrounding me, hurting me like an animal. "There's nowhere to run, Silas," Ava called out. "This is our forest now. We know every trail, every hiding place." I backed away from Sarah, trying to keep all of them in sight. But the fog was so thick I could barely see my own hands. I felt like I was drowning in gray wool, every direction looking the same. That's when I remembered the emergency flare in my jacket pocket. Standard gear for all rangers, in case of emergencies. I pulled it out with numb fingers, hoping the waterproof casing had done its job. The flare ignited with a brilliant red light cutting through the fog like a knife. For a moment I could see clearly. Sarah standing 10 feet away. Ava emerging from the trees to my left. The man approaching from my right. All of them moving with that same predatory grace, their faces illuminated by the hellish red glow. I threw the flare as far as I could and ran in the opposite direction, using the momentary confusion to break free from their circle. Behind me, I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, no longer trying to be stealthy. The flare provided just enough light to navigate by, its red glow filtering through the fog. I ran blindly, crashing through brambles and jumping over fallen logs. My lungs burned, and my wet clothes clung to my skin like ice, but I kept running. I don't know how long I ran through that nightmare forest. Time seemed to stretch and compress. Minutes feeling like hours. Hours passing in seconds. The fog never lifted, and the voices never stopped. Sarah calling for help, Ava pleading for rescue, the man speaking in that grinding voice about eternal servitude. It was the sound of an engine that finally brought me back to reality. Somewhere ahead, cutting through the fog, I heard the low rumble of a Park Service vehicle. Backup had finally arrived. I stumbled toward the sound, shouting at the top of my lungs. "Here! I'm here, officer in distress!" The fog began to thin as I approached what I hoped was the main trail. The red glow of the flare had long since faded, but I could see the sweep of headlights through the trees, a Park Service truck, its emergency lights flashing. I burst through the last line of trees and onto the trail, nearly colliding with Ranger Martinez as she stepped out of the vehicle. "Silas, Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" I looked down at myself, uniform torn and muddy, soaked through from the falls, bleeding from dozens of small cuts. I must have looked like I'd been through a war. "Serial killer," I gasped. "In the woods. He's got Ava Marsh, been taking people for years. Sarah Maddox, he's got her too." Martinez grabbed my shoulders, steadying me. "Slow down. What serial killer? The missing person case?" "He's been living in the park," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Using the victims somehow, controlling them. They're not dead, but they're not alive either. They're..." "Silas, you're in shock. Let's get you to the hospital." "No," I pulled away from her. "You don't understand. He's still out there. They're all still out there. We need to search the area around Cataract Falls. We did search around Cataract Falls," Martinez said gently. "That's where we found you. You were lying unconscious at the base of the falls. You must have hit your head when you fell." I stared at her, confusion washing over me. "What do you mean, found me? I was running from them. I used the flare to..." "What flare?" "Silas, you've been missing for 6 hours. When backup couldn't reach you by radio, we organized a search. We found you unconscious by the water, hypothermic and delusional." "The cameras," I said desperately. "I found Ava's cameras. The photograph with the man in the background." Martinez looked at me with concern. "We found the cameras too. Water damage destroyed the memory cards. There were no photographs." The world seemed to tilt around me. But I saw them. I saw Ava. She was there, but she wasn't herself. And Sarah. Sarah Maddox was there too. She hasn't aged. She's been trapped for 12 years. "Silas. Sarah Maddox has been dead for 12 years. We found her body 3 days after she disappeared, remember? Accidental drowning. You were there when we pulled her out of the creek." I remembered. Of course I remembered. The small body in the pink jacket, waterlogged and still. The funeral, the parents' grief, the guilt that had eaten at me for years because I'd failed to find her in time. "Then what happened to me out there?" I asked. "The man, The thing controlling people? Hypothermia. Martinez said. Hallucinations are common with severe exposure. You fell into the water, hit your head, and your mind created an elaborate fantasy to explain what happened. I wanted to argue, to insist that what I'd experienced was real, but the rational part of my mind was already accepting the explanation. Serial killers don't control people's minds. Dead children don't remain 8 years old forever. The fog, the disorientation, the head injury. It all made sense. But as Martinez helped me into the truck, I looked back at the forest one more time. The fog was lifting now, revealing the familiar shapes of trees and rocks. It looked completely normal, just another stretch of Appalachian wilderness. Except for the footprints in the mud beside the trail. 3 sets of tracks, leading away from where I'd been found. One set was small, child-sized, with the distinctive tread of hiking boots. The other 2 were adult-sized, 1 male, 1 female. I started to point them out to Martinez, but she was already closing the truck door. Through the window, I watched the footprints disappear as rain began to fall, washing away the last evidence of what had happened, or what I believed had happened, in the fog. They never found Ava Marsh. The official report listed her as missing, presumed dead, the victim of an unfortunate accident in the wilderness. Her cameras were recovered, but the water damage made them useless. Her campsite was found intact, her car remained in the parking lot, and there were no signs of foul play. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, being treated for hypothermia, concussion, and what the doctors politely called acute stress reaction. The Park Service put me on administrative leave, with mandatory counseling sessions and a recommendation that I consider a desk job. I never returned to active duty as a ranger. How could I? Every time I looked at those trails, I saw the fog rolling in between the trees. Every time I heard a child's voice in the distance, I thought of Sarah's ancient eyes and her 8-year-old face, but I never stopped looking for the truth. I spent my own money hiring private investigators, searching through old case files, tracking down every missing person report in the Southeast. The pattern was there if you knew how to look for it. People disappearing in wilderness areas, their bodies never found. The cases eventually going cold. What I found was a trail of disappearances stretching back decades. Hikers, campers, hunters, and rangers, all vanishing without a trace in remote areas of national parks. The deaths were always explained as accidents, bear attacks, or people simply getting lost in the wilderness. But the pattern was too consistent, too organized. Someone was hunting in these woods. Someone who knew the terrain, understood search patterns, and had been operating for a very long time. Someone who was very good at making people disappear. I never found concrete proof of what I'd experienced that day in the fog. But I never stopped believing it was real. And sometimes late at night I get phone calls with no one on the other end. Just the sound of breathing, and occasionally, very faintly, a child's voice whispering my name. The official story is that I suffered a psychological breakdown brought on by stress and guilt over my inability to save Sarah Maddox. The doctors say my mind created an elaborate fantasy to cope with the trauma of another missing person case. They say the head injury and hypothermia caused vivid hallucinations that seemed real to me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did imagine it all. But I know what I saw in that fog. I know what I felt when Ava's fingers closed around my wrist with inhuman strength. I know the sound of Sarah's voice, calling for help after 12 years of being trapped in her own body. And I know that somewhere in the wilderness, in the deep woods where the fog never lifts and the trails lead to nowhere, they're still out there, waiting, watching, hunting. The Park Service has covered up the truth about what's happening in these forests. They can't afford to let people know that something is stalking visitors in our national parks. The tourism revenue, the public trust, it would all disappear if people knew the real danger lurking in the wilderness. So they blame bear attacks, accidental drownings, and people getting lost. They have explanations for everything, rational reasons why dozens of people vanish without a trace every year. But they know the truth. They have to know. I'm telling this story now because I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say. I have maybe 3 months left, and I want someone to know what really happened that day in the fog. I want someone to continue looking for the truth after I'm gone. Because they're still out there, in the deep woods where the fog never lifts, and they're still hunting. If you're reading this, if you're planning to visit the Great Smoky Mountains or any other national park, please be careful. Don't hike alone. Don't camp in remote areas. And if you see fog rolling in between the trees, if you hear voices calling for help in the distance, if you find equipment that seems deliberately placed, run. Don't look back. Don't try to be a hero. Just run. Because some things in the wilderness are worse than getting lost. Some things are worse than dying. Some things are worse than death itself. My name is Silas Brightwater, and I was a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2011, when the missing person case of Ava Marsh turned into something that still haunts me. They're still out there, still hunting, still waiting. And someday they'll find someone else to add to their collection. Someone else to trap in their own body, conscious but powerless, watching through their own eyes as they do terrible things. Don't let it be you. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2019, when what seemed like a routine missing person case involving Campbell Torres became something that still haunts me every time I hear the wind through autumn leaves. The call came in at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October. I remember the exact time because I was filling out my daily patrol report when dispatch crackled through my radio, with that particular urgency that meant someone's day was about to get a lot worse. Unit 7, we have a missing person report. 23-year-old male Campbell Torres failed to return from a day hike on the Appalachian Trail. Last seen this morning around 7 a.m. at the Clingman's Dome trailhead. I keyed the radio. Unit 7 responding. Any additional details? Negative at this time. Families driving up from Knoxville. ETA about an hour. I'd handled dozens of missing person cases over the years. Most ended with embarrassed hikers emerging from the wrong trail, dehydrated and sheepish. A few required overnight searches, the really bad ones. Well, you learn not to think about those until you have to. The October sky was already dimming when I reached the trailhead. The parking lot held maybe 6 cars, typical for a weekday this late in the season. Most tourists had cleared out after the peak foliage weeks, leaving the mountains to serious hikers and locals like me who knew the trails could be more beautiful and more dangerous in the emptier months. I found Campbell's car easily enough, a blue Honda Civic with Tennessee plates and a University of Tennessee decal on the rear window. The doors were locked, but through the windows I could see a water bottle, energy bars, and what looked like a trail map spread across the passenger seat. Normal gear for a day hike. The family arrived as I was photographing the vehicle. Campbell's mother, Maria Torres, was a small woman with worried eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. His father, Robert, stood behind her with the kind of rigid posture that suggested he was holding himself together through sheer will. "He's an experienced hiker," Maria said before I could ask. "He's done this trail 3 times this year. He knows to be back before dark." I pulled out my notebook. "When did you last speak with him?" "Yesterday evening. He called to say he was driving up this morning. Planned to hike to Charlie's Bunyan and back. Should have been a 6-hour trip, maybe 7 with photo stops." Charlie's Bunyan was a popular destination, a rocky outcropping about 4 miles up the trail with spectacular views of the Tennessee Valley. I'd hiked it myself countless times. In good weather, it was a moderate trek suitable for anyone in decent shape. Was he hiking alone? Yes, he likes the solitude. Robert's voice was tight. Said it helped him think. I took down their contact information and Campbell's physical description. 5'10", brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a red REI jacket and black hiking boots. He carried a blue North Face backpack and had a smartphone, though cell service was spotty at best once you got more than a mile up the trail. "We'll start the search immediately," I assured them. "I'll need you to stay near the parking area in case he comes back on his own." The truth was, I wasn't overly concerned yet. Campbell was young, fit, and experienced. Even if he'd gotten turned around or injured, he had enough daylight left to find his way back or signal for help. Most missing hikers turned up within the first few hours. I radioed for backup and started up the trail with my emergency kit. First aid supplies, extra water, high-powered flashlight, flares, and a GPS unit. The path was well marked and maintained, cutting through dense forest that was just past peak color. Maple and oak leaves created a red-gold carpet that muffled my footsteps. The first mile passed quickly. I called Campbell's name every few minutes and listened for responses. The forest was quiet except for the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a barred owl. No signs of disturbance, no abandoned gear, no indication that anyone had left the main trail. At mile marker 2, I met Tom Bradshaw, another ranger who'd started from the opposite direction. Tom was in his 50s, a former military man who'd been working the park for nearly 20 years. If anyone could find signs of trouble, it was him. "Anything?" I asked. He shook his head. "Trail's clear all the way to the Bunyan. No sign of him up there either. Fresh footprints, but they could be from any hiker in the last few days." We decided to split up. Tom would check the side trails and overlooks while I continued toward the more remote sections. It was getting darker and the temperature was dropping fast. If Campbell was injured somewhere off the main path, we needed to find him soon. That's when I first noticed something was wrong with my radio. "Unit 7 to dispatch," I called. Static. I tried again. More static, but underneath it, something else. A low sound, almost like whispers, but not quite. I adjusted the frequency and tried once more. "Unit 7 to dispatch, do you copy?" The static cleared for a moment and I heard what sounded like my own voice saying, "He's not lost, he's waiting." I stopped walking. That was impossible. Radio interference could cause all sorts of strange effects, but not that. I keyed the radio again. "Tom, do you copy?" "I'm here, Rebecca. What's your location?" Relief flooded through me. Mile marker 3 heading toward the backcountry junction. Radio's acting up. Mountain weather coming in, could be affecting the signal. I looked up through the canopy. The sky was clear, stars just beginning to appear. But Tom was right. Weather could move in fast in the mountains, and electronic equipment often went haywire before a storm. I continued up the trail, but the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger with each step. The forest seemed too quiet. No insect sounds, no small animals rustling through the underbrush. Even the wind had died down, leaving an oppressive stillness that made my skin crawl. At mile marker 4, I found the first piece of evidence. A red fabric scrap hung from a thorn bush about 10 feet off the trail. It was the right color to match Campbell's jacket, and it looked fresh. I photographed it and marked the GPS coordinates before carefully removing it with tweezers. The strange part was its location. The bush was well off the maintained trail, in an area where the undergrowth was thick enough to require serious bushwhacking. Why would an experienced hiker leave the path there? There was no overlook, no water source, no reason to deviate from the route. I followed the direction the fabric suggested, using my flashlight to scan for more signs. The beam picked up broken branches and disturbed leaves, definite signs of passage. But the trail led deeper into the forest, away from all the established paths and campsites. "Unit 7 to dispatch." I tried again. This time, the static was accompanied by what sounded like breathing. Heavy, labored breathing, as if someone was running hard. "Campbell?" I called into the radio. "Campbell, if you can hear this, respond." The breathing stopped. My hands were shaking as I clipped the radio back to my belt. 12 years of experience told me to call for backup, return to the main trail, and wait for the full search team to arrive in the morning. But something else, instinct maybe, or just stubbornness, made me keep going. The improvised trail led to a small clearing I'd never seen before, despite years of hiking these mountains. In the center stood a single oak tree, massive and ancient, its trunk easily 6 feet in diameter. The ground around it was bare earth, as if nothing would grow there. Campbell Torres sat at the base of the tree. His back was to me, but I could see the red jacket, the dark hair, the blue backpack beside him. He was completely motionless. "Campbell?" I called. He didn't respond. I approached slowly, hand resting on my radio. "Campbell, I'm Rebecca Chen, a park ranger. Your family's been looking for you." Still nothing. I was maybe 10 feet away when I noticed he wasn't breathing. His chest wasn't rising and falling. His shoulders weren't moving. He was sitting upright, but there was no sign of life. Campbell? I reached out and touched his shoulder. He turned around. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. The face that looked at me was Campbell's. Same brown eyes, same features I'd memorized from his parents' description. But something was fundamentally wrong. His skin was gray-white, like marble. His eyes were open but completely vacant, as if he was looking through me rather than at me. And he was smiling, not a normal smile. His lips were stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. It was the smile of something that had learned how to mimic human expressions, but didn't quite understand what they meant. "Found me," he said. His voice was Campbell's voice, but it came from somewhere else, echoing strangely in the small clearing. I grabbed for my radio. "Unit 7 to dispatch, I need immediate backup. I found Campbell Torres, but..." The radio crackled with my own voice. "He's not lost. He's waiting." Campbell stood up. The movement was wrong, too smooth, too fluid, as if he was being pulled upright by invisible strings. He took a step toward me. "We've been waiting," he said, still smiling that terrible smile. "So long." I backed away, keeping my flashlight trained on him. "Campbell, I need you to stay where you are. You're safe now. We're going to get you back to your family." He tilted his head, and I heard something crack in his neck. "Family?" "Your parents, Maria and Robert. They're worried about you." The smile widened. "They won't recognize me now." He was right. Whatever was wearing Campbell's face, it wasn't Campbell anymore. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was why my equipment was malfunctioning. This was why the forest was so quiet. This was why I'd never seen this clearing before, despite years of hiking these trails. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. "What do you want?" I asked. "To go home," Campbell said. "To go back. To be with people again." He took another step forward, and I saw that his feet weren't quite touching the ground. He was floating, hovering just above the dead earth around the oak tree. I ran. Behind me I heard laughter, Campbell's laughter, but multiplied somehow, as if a dozen voices were laughing in unison. The sound followed me as I crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at my clothes and face. I couldn't find the trail. Every direction looked the same in the darkness, and my flashlight beam seemed weaker than before, as if the forest was drinking in the light. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my lungs burning with each breath. The laughter was getting closer. I tried the radio again, but now it was just static. No voices, no whispers, nothing but white noise that seemed to echo the chaos in my head. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, expecting to see Campbell's gray face and terrible smile. Instead, I found Tom Bradshaw, looking as frightened as I felt. "Rebecca, thank God. I've been looking for you for hours." "Hours?" I checked my watch. It was past midnight. I'd been in the forest for over 3 hours, but it felt like minutes. "Your radio went dead. I couldn't reach you or dispatch. Something's wrong with all the equipment." I grabbed his arm. "We have to get out of here, now." "Did you find him?" "Something found him first." Tom didn't ask for details. He was experienced enough to know when to ask questions and when to just move. We linked arms and started walking, using his GPS to navigate back toward the main trail. The forest around us was alive with sounds now. Whispers, footsteps, that terrible laughter echoing from multiple directions. Shapes moved between the trees, always just outside the range of our flashlights. Several times I saw what looked like Campbell, standing motionless in the distance, watching us with those empty eyes. "Don't look at them," Tom said quietly. "Just keep walking." The main trail, when we finally reached it, felt like stepping back into reality. The oppressive weight in the air lifted slightly, and our radios crackled back to life. Dispatch was frantic. They'd lost contact with both of us and had called in additional search teams. We made it back to the parking lot at 2 a.m. Campbell's parents were still there, huddled in their car with blankets and coffee from the other rangers. When they saw us emerge from the forest alone, Maria Torres began to cry. "We found signs of him," I told them, hating myself for the lie. "But the search will have to continue in the morning. The terrain gets dangerous in the dark." They nodded, understanding. They were good people who trusted that we were doing everything we could. The official search continued for 6 days. 36 rangers and volunteers combed every trail, every overlook, every known camping spot within a 20-mile radius. We found nothing. No more fabric scraps, no footprints, no sign that Campbell Torres had ever existed. On the 7th day, we found him. He was sitting in the parking lot beside his Honda Civic wearing the same red jacket and carrying the same blue backpack. He looked exactly as his parents had described. 5'10", brown hair, brown eyes, perfectly normal. Except for the smile. He was smiling that same too-wide smile, showing too many teeth, and his eyes were empty. "I got lost," he told the search coordinator. "Spent a few days wandering around. Finally found my way back." The search coordinator, a veteran named Sarah Mills, accepted the explanation without question. These things happened. People got disoriented, made poor decisions, survived on their own for days before finding their way back to civilization. But I saw the way Campbell looked at me when he thought no one was watching. The recognition in those vacant eyes, the slight nod, as if we shared a secret. His parents were overjoyed. They hugged him and cried and thanked all the rangers who'd spent a week looking for him. Campbell hugged them back, said all the right things, acted like a loving son who'd just been through a frightening experience. Only I noticed that he was still floating, just a fraction of an inch above the ground. They drove away that afternoon, a happy family reunited. I watched their car disappear down the mountain road and wondered what would happen when they got home. Would they notice the little things, the way Campbell's feet didn't quite touch the floor, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the way he tilted his head when he listened, as if he was hearing voices they couldn't hear? Would they realize that whatever had come back with them wasn't their son? I never reported what I saw in that clearing. Who would believe me? A veteran park ranger claiming she'd found a possessed hiker in a magical forest clearing that couldn't be located on any map. They'd have transferred me to desk duty at best, forced retirement at worst. But I started paying attention to the missing person reports from other parks, looking for patterns. Hikers who disappeared for days or weeks, then returned with stories that didn't quite add up. Families who were grateful to have their loved ones back, but quietly worried about the small changes in personality, the subtle wrongness that they couldn't quite articulate. There are more of them than you'd think. I still work at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, still respond to missing person calls, still search the trails and overlooks for lost hikers. But now I carry more than just emergency supplies. I carry salt, iron filings, and a small mirror blessed by a Cherokee elder I know in Gatlinburg. And I never, ever search alone after dark. Because I've learned that sometimes, when people go missing in the mountains, they don't stay missing. They come back. But they don't come back alone. Last month, I got a call from Maria Torres. Her voice was shaking, barely holding together. "Rebecca? The ranger who found Campbell?" "Yes, ma'am. Is everything all right?" It's Campbell. He's been acting strange since he came back. He doesn't sleep. He stares at us while we're sleeping. And yesterday I found him in the backyard, just standing there. He'd been there for hours, not moving, just waiting. I closed my eyes. "Mrs. Torres, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Take your husband and leave the house. Go to a hotel, a friend's place, anywhere but home. And whatever you do, don't go back alone." "But he's our son." "No," I said quietly. "He's not." The line went dead. I've tried calling back, but the number's been disconnected. I've searched online for any news about the Torres family, but there's nothing. No missing person reports, no news articles, no social media updates. It's as if they never existed. But sometimes when I'm hiking the trails late in the evening, I see a figure in a red jacket standing among the trees. Always watching, always smiling, always waiting for the next lost hiker to find their way into the dark places where the mountains keep their secrets. And I know that Campbell Torres is still out there, in that clearing that exists between the spaces on the map. Still sitting under that ancient oak tree, still wearing someone else's face, still learning how to be human, still waiting for someone else to find him. The mountains are patient. They've been here for millions of years, and they'll be here for millions more. They can wait, but I can't. Every night I dream about that clearing, about Campbell's empty eyes and terrible smile, about the way he said, "They won't recognize me now." And in my dreams, I hear other voices, dozens of them, all saying the same thing. We're coming home. Rebecca Chen retired from the National Park Service 6 months after the Campbell Torres incident. She now works as a private investigator specializing in missing person cases, though she rarely takes clients who want to search in forested areas. She lives alone in a cabin outside Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where she keeps all the lights on at night and never ventures outside after sunset. The Torres family has never been found. Campbell Torres is still listed as a missing person, despite multiple reported sightings throughout the southeastern United States. If you encounter someone matching his description, particularly someone with an unnaturally wide smile who seems to be floating just above the ground, do not approach. Contact local authorities immediately. The National Park Service has no official comment on this account. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I've been a park ranger at Shenandoah National Park for 12 years. This happened during late October 2023, when what seemed like a routine missing person case involving Campbell Brooks became something that still haunts me every time I hear static on my radio. The call came in at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as the autumn light was beginning to fade behind the skeletal branches of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I was finishing my patrol of the Skyline Drive when dispatch crackled through my radio with that particular tone that always makes my stomach tighten, the one reserved for emergencies. Unit 7, we have a missing person report. 23-year-old male Campbell Brooks failed to return from a day hike on the Appalachian Trail. Last seen this morning at 8 a.m. starting from the Thornton Gap parking area. I acknowledged the call and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. 12 years of experience had taught me that missing hikers usually fell into predictable categories. Inexperienced day hikers who underestimated the terrain, experienced hikers who overestimated their abilities, or people dealing with personal crises who came to the wilderness seeking something they couldn't find in civilization. Campbell Brooks, according to the initial report, seemed to fit the first category, a college student from Richmond who'd driven up alone for what he'd described to his roommate as a quick hike to clear my head. The temperature was dropping fast as evening approached, and the Weather Service had issued a frost warning for overnight. If Campbell was injured or lost, hypothermia would become a serious concern within hours. I radioed for additional units and began the 40-minute drive to Thornton Gap, my headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The parking area was nearly empty when I arrived, just Campbell's silver Honda Civic sitting alone under a flickering lamppost. I pulled up beside it and immediately began my assessment. The car was unlocked, which wasn't unusual for day hikers who didn't want to carry keys. His wallet was in the glove compartment along with a campus ID that showed a young man with sandy hair and an easy smile. No obvious signs of distress or hurried departure. I was examining the vehicle when Rangers Tom Chen and Alex Santos arrived, their headlights sweeping across the lot. Tom was relatively new, maybe 3 years on the job, but Alex had been with the Park Service almost as long as I had. We'd worked dozens of search operations together, and I trusted his instincts. "What do we know?" Alex asked, pulling on his heavy jacket as he approached. Campbell Brooks, 23, started hiking around 8 a.m. Roommate expected him back by 4 p.m. I checked my watch. 3 hours ago. Car's unlocked, wallet inside. No note, no obvious signs of trouble. Tom was already unloading search equipment from his vehicle. Which direction was he headed? Roommate said he mentioned wanting to hike a section of the AT, but didn't specify which direction. Could be north toward Mary's Rock or south toward Stony Man. We established our initial search plan. Alex would take the northern route, Tom the southern, and I would coordinate from the trailhead while also checking the immediate area for any signs of Campbell's passage. The Appalachian Trail was well marked, but there were dozens of side trails and unmarked paths that could easily confuse an inexperienced hiker. As my colleagues headed out with their flashlights and radios, I began examining the ground near the parking area. The recent rain had left the soil soft, and I could make out several sets of boot prints leading toward the trail. One set looked fresh, deep treads, size 10 or 11 heading north. I followed them for about 50 yards before they merged with the countless other footprints on the main trail. Unit 7 to Units 12 and 15, I radioed. I've got fresh boot prints heading north from the parking area. Alex, you might want to focus on that direction. Alex's voice crackled back through the radio. Copy that. I'm about half a mile north of the parking area now. No signs of recent passage, but I'll keep looking. I continued my search of the immediate area, using my flashlight to examine the bushes and trees for any torn fabric or other signs of someone leaving the trail. The forest was eerily quiet. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals, just the soft whisper of wind through the bare branches. After 12 years in these mountains, I'd learned to read the moods of the wilderness, and something felt off tonight. The silence was too complete, too heavy. 20 minutes later, Tom's voice came through the radio with our first real lead. Unit 15 to Unit 7. I found something about a mile south of the parking area. Looks like someone left the main trail here. What do you see? I asked, already heading in his direction. Boot prints leaving the AT and heading west toward the creek. Fresh, probably made today. And there's something else. A piece of fabric caught on a branch about 10 feet off the trail. I reached Tom's position 15 minutes later. He was crouched beside a small stream, his flashlight illuminating the muddy bank. The boot prints were clear in the soft earth, the same tread pattern I'd seen at the parking area, but something about them bothered me. They looked deliberate. Not like someone who was lost or confused, but like someone who knew exactly where they were going. Show me the fabric, I said. Tom led me to a low branch where a small piece of blue cloth hung like a flag. It looked like it came from a hiking jacket, the kind of synthetic material that was popular with college students. But as I examined it more closely, something made me pause. The tear was too clean, too precise. It didn't look like it had been accidentally snagged by someone pushing through the brush. It looked like it had been deliberately placed. Alex, what's your status? I radioed. Static answered me. I tried again. Unit 12, please respond. More static, then a faint voice that might have been Alex but was too distorted to understand. Tom, are you getting Alex on the radio? He tried his own unit with the same result. Must be the terrain, he said, but I could hear uncertainty in his voice. Radio dead zones weren't uncommon in the mountains, but Alex had been on a well-traveled section of the trail where we'd never had communication problems before. I made a decision. We'll follow these prints for a while, see where they lead. If we don't find anything in 30 minutes, we'll head back and call for additional resources. We followed the boot prints west into increasingly dense forest. The trail, if you could call it that, wound between massive boulders and around fallen logs, always staying near the creek. Our flashlights created a small bubble of visibility in the darkness, beyond which the trees pressed close like watching figures. After 10 minutes of careful tracking, Tom stopped suddenly. Rebecca, look at this. His light was focused on a large boulder beside the creek. Scratched into the rock's surface were what looked like symbols. Not natural wear patterns, but deliberate markings. They were crude, but systematic, carved deep enough to be clearly visible in our flashlight beams. Could be old graffiti, Tom suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. I studied the symbols more closely. They didn't look like typical vandalism. No names, no dates, no hearts or initials. Instead, they formed a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic, a series of intersecting lines and circles that made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't articulate. Let's keep moving, I said, suddenly eager to be away from the marked stone. We continued following the prints, which now seemed to be leading us in a rough circle. I was beginning to suspect we were tracking someone who was either very lost or very confused, when we came upon something that made both of us stop dead. There, in a small clearing beside the creek, sat a backpack. It was positioned perfectly upright against a tree, as if someone had carefully placed it there. Tom approached cautiously while I covered him with my flashlight. "It's his," Tom said, checking the contents. "Driver's license says Campbell Brooks, and look at this." He held up a small notebook, its pages filled with handwritten text. I took it and began reading by flashlight. The first several pages contained normal hiking observations, weather conditions, trail markers, wildlife sightings. But as I flipped through the pages, the writing began to change. The letters became more erratic, the observations stranger. "The trees are watching. I can feel them turning their attention to me. Found the symbols. They're not random. They're instructions. The voice in the creek is calling my name. It knows things about me I've never told anyone." The final entry was dated today, time-stamped 2:30 p.m. "I understand now. I have to go deeper. The others are waiting for me." "The others?" Tom asked, reading over my shoulder. Before I could respond, we heard it, a voice calling from somewhere deeper in the forest. It was faint but unmistakably human, and it was calling Campbell's name. "Campbell, Campbell, where are you?" Tom and I exchanged glances. "Could be Alex," he said hopefully. I tried the radio again, still static. "Alex? Is that you? What's your location?" The voice continued calling, but it didn't respond to my radio transmission. And as we listened more carefully, something about it seemed wrong. The tone was too flat, too mechanical. It was like listening to a recording of someone calling a name rather than a person actually searching for someone. "We need to investigate," I said, though every instinct was telling me to turn around and head back to the parking area. We followed the sound deeper into the forest, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The voice continued calling Campbell's name, always seeming to come from just ahead of us, just out of sight. But no matter how far we walked, we never seemed to get closer to the source. After 15 minutes of this frustrating pursuit, the voice suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic from Skyline Drive. Just the sound of our own breathing and the soft crunch of leaves under our boots. "I don't like this," Tom whispered. That's when we saw the light. It was about 50 yards ahead, flickering between the trees like a campfire. But this was a restricted area. Camping wasn't allowed this far from the designated sites. I signaled for Tom to follow me as we approached cautiously. The light was coming from a small clearing where someone had built a fire. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't a normal campfire. The flames were too bright, too white, and they cast no shadows. The wood feeding the fire looked fresh, as if it had been cut recently, but there were no tools anywhere in sight. And sitting beside the fire, staring directly at us, was Campbell Brooks. He looked exactly like his driver's license photo, sandy hair, easy smile, wearing a blue hiking jacket with a fresh tear in the sleeve. But something was fundamentally wrong with the scene. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Campbell?" I called softly. "Are you all right?" He didn't respond, didn't blink, just sat there staring at us with that horrible smile frozen on his face. Tom started forward, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait," I whispered. "Something's not right." That's when I noticed Campbell's shadow, or rather the absence of it. Despite the bright fire beside him, he cast no shadow on the ground, and his clothes, which should have been dirty and torn after a day of hiking through rough terrain, were perfectly clean. "Campbell," I tried again, louder this time. "We're park rangers. Your roommate reported you missing. We're here to help." This time he responded, but not in the way I expected. His head turned toward me with a mechanical precision that no human joint should possess. The smile never left his face, but his eyes. His eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire visible eye, like looking into deep water at night. "I'm not lost," he said, and his voice was the same flat, mechanical tone we'd heard calling earlier. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Tom's hand went to his radio, but I already knew it wouldn't work. Whatever was happening here existed outside the normal rules of the world I knew. "The others told me you'd come," Campbell continued, still staring at us with those horrible black eyes. "They said you'd try to take me back, but I can't go back. I've seen what's waiting in the deep places." "What others?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Campbell's smile widened impossibly, stretching beyond what human facial muscles should allow. "The ones who've been waiting, the ones who came before. They showed me the symbols. They taught me the words." As he spoke, I began to hear something else, a low humming that seemed to come from the earth itself. It was barely audible at first, but it grew stronger with each word Campbell spoke. And with the humming came a smell, sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. "Tom," I whispered without taking my eyes off Campbell, "we need to leave, now." But when I glanced sideways, Tom was gone. I was alone in the clearing with the thing that looked like Campbell Brooks, the impossible fire, and the growing humming that seemed to be coming from inside my own head. "Where's my partner?" I demanded, my hand moving to the gun on my belt, though I suspected it would be useless against whatever this was. "He heard the call," Campbell said, his voice now coming from multiple directions at once. "He went to join the others, just like you will." The humming was getting louder, and I could feel it resonating in my bones. The edges of my vision were starting to blur, and I had the terrifying realization that I was losing myself to whatever force had taken Campbell. With what felt like enormous effort, I forced myself to look away from those black eyes and focus on my feet. One step backward, then another. The humming protested, rising in pitch and intensity, but I kept moving. "You can't leave," Campbell said, and now his voice was coming from behind me as well as in front. "You've seen too much. You understand too much." I didn't turn around. I kept walking backward, step by careful step, until I reached the edge of the clearing. Then I turned and ran. The forest had changed. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching down like grasping fingers. The ground beneath my feet felt spongy and unstable, as if I was running across a vast grave. And everywhere I looked, I saw lights. Not the harsh white of Campbell's fire, but softer, more seductive glows that beckoned from between the trees. I ran toward what I hoped was the direction of the creek, but the landscape kept shifting around me. Paths that should have led back to the trail instead curved away into darker regions of the forest. The humming followed me, sometimes fading to a whisper, sometimes rising to a roar that threatened to burst my eardrums. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to have lost all meaning in that place. But eventually, I stumbled out of the tree line and found myself back at the creek where we'd discovered Campbell's backpack. The backpack was gone. So were the boot prints. So were the symbols carved into the boulder. It was as if none of it had ever existed. I tried my radio with shaking hands. This time, it worked. "Unit 7 to dispatch. I need immediate backup at my location. We have a situation." "Unit 7, this is dispatch. What's the nature of your emergency?" I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell them about the thing that looked like Campbell Brooks? About the impossible fire and the voices in the darkness? About Tom disappearing into thin air? "Unit 7, please respond. Are you all right?" I need search and rescue teams at Thornton Gap. We have a missing person situation that's become complicated." "Copy that. Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" I looked down at my hands and realized they were covered in scratches I didn't remember receiving. My jacket was torn in several places, and I was missing one of my boots. But I felt no pain, no memory of how I'd been injured. I'm fine. Just send backup." The search and rescue teams arrived within an hour. They found Campbell's car still in the parking lot, but no trace of Campbell himself, or of Tom. According to the official records, Tom had never been assigned to the search operation. When I insisted he'd been there, they showed me the duty roster. I'd been the only ranger sent to investigate the missing person report. They found Campbell's body 3 days later, at the bottom of a ravine about 2 miles from where I'd encountered the thing by the fire. The medical examiner determined he'd been dead for at least 24 hours, which meant he'd died before I'd even received the missing person report. The official conclusion was that Campbell had fallen while hiking alone, struck his head on a rock, and died from his injuries. Case closed. But I know what I saw in that clearing. I know what happened to Tom, even if no one else remembers him. And I know that whatever took Campbell is still out there, waiting for the next person who ventures too far from the marked trails. I've been a park ranger for 12 years, and I've seen my share of strange things in the wilderness. But nothing prepared me for that night in late October when I learned that there are places in the deep forest where the normal rules don't apply. Places where the missing stay missing, where the dead speak with living voices, and where the darkness has eyes that watch and remember. I still work at Shenandoah, but I don't take night shifts anymore. And when hikers ask me about the unmarked trails that lead away from the main paths, I tell them what I tell everyone now. Stick to the marked routes, travel in groups, and never ever follow the voices that call your name from the deep places of the forest. Because some searches are meant to fail, some missing people are meant to stay lost, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The humming still comes to me sometimes, usually in the quiet hours before dawn. It whispers about the others who are waiting, about the symbols that unlock terrible truths, about the deep places where the real world ends and something else begins. But I've learned to ignore it, to focus on the familiar sounds of the waking forest, the bird calls, the rustling leaves, the distant traffic on Skyline Drive. I've learned to stay in the light, to trust only what I can verify, and to never ever go looking for the things that are better left unfound. But on nights like tonight, when the October wind carries strange scents and stranger sounds, I sometimes wonder if Campbell Brooks is still out there somewhere, sitting beside that impossible fire, smiling his frozen smile and waiting for the next searcher to find him. I wonder if Tom is with him now, and if they're both calling my name from the deep places of the forest, patient and persistent and eternal. I wonder, but I don't search. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some searches are better left incomplete. My name is Dylan, and I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 12 years. This happened during the fall of 2019, when what seemed like a routine missing person case involving Elena Martinez became something that still haunts me every time I patrol the deep woods after dark. The report came in on a Tuesday evening, just as the October sun was bleeding through the canopy and painting the forest floor in shades of amber and rust. A 26-year-old woman from Seattle had failed to return from a solo hiking trip on the Hoh River Trail. Elena Martinez, experienced hiker according to her emergency contact information, with proper gear and a detailed itinerary filed with the visitor center. She was supposed to be back by 4 p.m. It was now past 8. I'd handled dozens of these cases over the years. Most ended with an embarrassed hiker emerging from the wrong trailhead, or someone who'd simply lost track of time and was making their way back by headlamp. But something felt different about this one from the start. Maybe it was the way the temperature had dropped 20 degrees since morning, or how the usual evening sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. My partner that night was Jake Morrison, a newer ranger who'd transferred from Yellowstone the previous spring. Good guy, solid in the field, but he hadn't yet developed the instincts that come with years of reading the forest's moods. As we geared up at the ranger station, I caught him checking his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Service cuts out about 2 miles up the trail, I told him, adjusting the straps on my pack. Radio only after that point. Jake nodded, but I could see the city boy in him wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of being completely cut off. He'd learn. They all did, eventually. We started up the Hoh River Trail at 8:30 p.m., our headlamps cutting narrow cones of light through the gathering darkness. The trail was familiar enough that I could have walked it blindfolded. Every route, every switchback, every spot where hikers typically took a wrong turn. But tonight, even the familiar felt somehow off-kilter. The forest in Olympic National Park is unlike anywhere else in the continental United States. Ancient Sitka spruces tower 300 feet overhead, their massive trunks disappearing into a canopy so thick that even on bright days, the forest floor exists in a state of perpetual twilight. Moss hangs like curtains from every branch, and the air itself seems to pulse with life, or in this case, the absence of it. She was supposed to camp at the Olympus Guard Station, I told Jake as we walked. That's about 18 miles in. If she stuck to her itinerary, she should have made it there by early afternoon. And if she didn't stick to her itinerary, I'd been asking myself the same question. Then we've got 122 square miles of wilderness to search. The first sign that something was wrong came at mile marker 3. Elena's emergency contact, her sister Rosa, had mentioned that Elena always left trail markers for herself when hiking alone. Little cairns of stacked stones arranged in a specific pattern that only she and Rosa knew. We found the first one about 50 yards off the main trail, near a cluster of Devil's Club that would have been nearly impossible to navigate through. "Why would she go this way?" Jake asked, shining his light on the thick, thorny undergrowth. I studied the cairn more carefully. 3 stones, stacked in a pyramid with a 4th stone placed perpendicular to the base. According to Rosa, this was Elena's safe passage marker, a sign that she'd successfully navigated a difficult section of terrain. But there was nothing difficult about this section. The main trail was clear, well-maintained, and easily passable. Going through the Devil's Club would have been unnecessarily painful and time-consuming. "She wouldn't," I said finally. "Not unless she was running from something." We followed the faint trail Elena had left through the undergrowth, our progress slow and methodical. Every few hundred yards we'd find another cairn, always the same configuration, always placed just where the route ahead became unclear. It was like following breadcrumbs through a fairy tale, if fairy tales took place in temperate rainforests where the trees seemed to lean in closer with every step. At 10:15 p.m., we reached a small clearing where Elena had clearly spent some time. The grass was compressed in a rough circle, and we found the remains of a small fire that had been carefully extinguished. But there were no signs of a struggle, no abandoned gear, and no indication of why she'd left the established trail in the first place. "Dylan," Jake called from the far side of the clearing, "you need to see this." He was standing next to a massive Douglas fir, its trunk easily 8 feet in diameter. Carved into the bark about shoulder height were 3 words: "They found me." The carving was fresh, sap still oozed from the cuts, and the wood showed no signs of weathering. But the letters themselves were wrong somehow. Too deep, too uniform, as if they'd been burned rather than carved. "Elena?" Jake asked. I ran my fingers over the letters. The bark around them was warm to the touch, despite the October chill. "Has to be, but this doesn't make sense." Rosa said Elena was hiking alone. Maybe she met someone on the trail? Or maybe someone met her. We radioed back to the station to report our findings, but the response came back garbled, full of static and strange echoes that made our dispatcher sound like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Jake adjusted the frequency, tried different channels, but nothing seemed to help. "Must be atmospheric interference," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. By 11 p.m., we'd lost Elena's trail completely. The cairn simply stopped appearing, and despite our best efforts, we couldn't pick up any sign of her passage through the underbrush. It was as if she'd simply vanished from the forest floor. That's when we heard the whistle. It came from deeper in the woods, a long, low note that seemed to hang in the air far longer than should have been possible. Jake and I exchanged glances. We both knew that sound. It was the emergency whistle that all backcountry hikers carried, designed to cut through forest noise and carry for miles. "Elena?" I called, my voice echoing off the trees. The whistle came again, from the same direction but somehow farther away. We began moving toward it, fighting through increasingly thick undergrowth as the trail disappeared entirely beneath our feet. For the next hour, we played a maddening game of hide-and-seek with that whistle. Every time we thought we were getting close, the sound would shift, leading us deeper into sections of the forest that I'd never seen before, despite my 12 years of experience in the park. Jake was the first to voice what we were both thinking. "Dylan, I don't think we're in the park anymore. I checked my GPS unit." According to the display, we were still well within park boundaries, but the terrain around us didn't match anything on our topographic maps. The trees were too tall, the undergrowth too thick, and the very air seemed to have taken on a greenish tinge that made our headlamps seem dim and ineffective. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. At 12:30 a.m., we found Elena's campsite. It was arranged in a perfect circle in a clearing that definitely hadn't been there on any of my previous patrols. Her tent was set up with military precision, guy lines taut, rainfly properly secured. A small camp stove sat on a flat rock with a pot of what looked like instant noodles still steaming, despite the fact that the fuel canister was empty. But Elena was nowhere to be seen. "Elena," I called. "Elena Martinez, can you hear me?" No response. Jake approached the tent cautiously. "Should we look inside?" "Standard procedure," I said, though nothing about this situation felt standard. The tent was empty, but Elena's sleeping bag was still warm, as if she'd just crawled out of it moments before our arrival. Her pack was neatly arranged at the foot of the bag, every item accounted for according to the gear list she'd filed with the visitor center, except for one thing. "Her radio's gone," Jake said, checking the pack's contents against the list. "She had a two-way radio, but it's not here." That's when we heard Elena's voice. It came from the trees surrounding the clearing, a whispered call that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Help me. Please help me." Both Jake and I spun toward the sound, our lights cutting through the darkness between the trees. "Elena?" I called. "Where are you?" "I'm lost," came the reply, but the voice was wrong somehow. Too flat, too emotionless, like someone reading from a script. "I can't find my way back." "Keep talking," Jake said, starting toward the tree line. "We're coming to get you." "Don't," I said, grabbing his arm. "Something's not right." "I'm scared," Elena's voice continued, but now it was coming from a different direction entirely. "It's so dark. I can't see anything." Jake shook off my grip. "She's frightened, Dylan. We have to help her." But I'd been in these woods long enough to know when something was hunting you. The voice was moving in a circle around our clearing, staying just outside the range of our lights, and each time it spoke it sounded a little less human. "I'm lost," it said again, but this time the words were stretched out, distorted, as if the speaker's mouth was the wrong shape. "I can't find my way back." "Elena," I called, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. "If you can hear me, I need you to stay where you are. Don't move. We're park rangers and we're here to help you." Silence. Then from directly behind us, close enough that I could feel breath on my neck. "You're too late." I spun around, my light cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just trees and shadows, and the growing certainty that whatever was speaking to us wasn't Elena Martinez. "We need to go," I told Jake. "Now." "But Elena, that's not Elena." As if to prove my point, the voice came again, but now it was clearly coming from above us, somewhere in the canopy. "I'm lost. I'm lost. I'm lost." The words echoed and multiplied, as if spoken by a dozen different mouths, each one slightly out of sync with the others. The effect was nauseating, like listening to a recording played at the wrong speed. Jake didn't need any more convincing. We broke camp and started moving, not toward the trail, we'd lost that hours ago, but toward what I hoped was the general direction of the ranger station. Behind us, Elena's voice continued to call from the trees. "Help me. Please help me. Don't leave me alone." But we kept moving, and eventually the voice faded into the distance. We walked for what felt like hours, our headlamps growing dim as the batteries slowly drained. Neither of us spoke, but I could see the fear in Jake's eyes every time I glanced in his direction. He was beginning to understand what I'd learned over 12 years of working in the deep woods. There are things in the forest that can't be explained by any training manual or emergency protocol. At 3 a.m., we reached a section of forest that I finally recognized, a distinctive rock formation about 5 miles from the ranger station. We were back on familiar ground, but the relief I felt was tempered by a growing dread. If we were back in known territory, Then where had we been for the past 6 hours? Dylan, Jake said quietly. What was that thing? I didn't have an answer for him. In 12 years of park service, I'd seen bears, cougars, and every other predator native to the Olympic Peninsula. I'd dealt with lost hikers, medical emergencies, and weather situations that would have killed less experienced outdoorsmen. But I'd never encountered anything that could throw its voice, that could lead experienced rangers in circles through terrain that didn't exist on any map. I don't know, I admitted. We were about 2 miles from the station when we heard the radio crackle to life. Base to Unit 7, come in, over. I grabbed the handset. Unit 7 to base, go ahead. Dylan, we've got a situation. Elena Martinez just walked into the visitor center. She's asking for you specifically. Jake and I exchanged glances. When did she arrive? About 10 minutes ago. She says she's been lost in the woods. But Dylan, there's something wrong with her. She won't stop staring at the radio and she keeps asking when you're coming back. We're about 20 minutes out, I said. Keep her there, but don't let her out of your sight. Copy that. Unit 7, be advised. She's not acting right. Martinez keeps repeating the same phrases over and over. I'm lost. I can't find my way back. You're too late. The whole thing is giving everyone the creeps. My blood ran cold. Those were the exact words we'd heard in the forest. Base, this is Unit 7. Under no circumstances should you let Martinez near the radio equipment. Do you copy? I copy, but why? The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Jake and I ran the rest of the way to the station. We arrived to find the building dark, all the lights out despite the fact that there should have been a skeleton crew on duty. The front door was standing open, and our footsteps echoed hollowly in the empty hallway as we made our way toward the dispatch office. The radio room was empty, but sitting in the dispatcher's chair, with her back to us, was Elena Martinez. She was wearing the same hiking clothes described in the missing person report, but they were completely clean and dry, as if she'd just put them on. Her long black hair hung in perfect waves down her back, and she sat with an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. Elena, I called softly. She turned around, and I immediately knew that whatever was sitting in that chair, it wasn't Elena Martinez. The face was right. The same dark eyes, the same high cheekbones, the same small scar above the left eyebrow that Rosa had mentioned. But the expression was completely wrong. The eyes were too wide, too unblinking, and the mouth was curved in a smile that never changed, never wavered, as if it had been carved into place. You're too late, she said, and her voice was the same one we'd heard in the forest. Flat, emotionless, like a recording played through a speaker with a dying battery. Where's my dispatcher? I demanded. I'm lost, Elena said, still smiling that terrible smile. I can't find my way back. Jake stepped forward. Elena, we're here to help you. Can you tell us where you've been? Help me, she said, but the words came out wrong, layered with echoes and static like a badly tuned radio. Please help me. That's when I noticed the radio in her lap. It was Elena's missing two-way radio, the one that hadn't been in her pack. But the display was showing impossible readings, frequencies that didn't exist, signal strengths that defied physics. Elena, I said carefully, I need you to put the radio down. She tilted her head, and I heard her neck crack with a sound like breaking wood. I can't, she said. It's the only way I can talk to you. You're talking to me now. No, she said, and for the first time her smile faltered. I'm not. The radio in her lap began to emit a high-pitched whine, like feedback from a microphone. The sound grew louder and more painful until both Jake and I were forced to cover our ears. Through the noise, I heard Elena's voice, the real Elena's voice, desperate and terrified. It took my voice. It took my voice and it won't give it back. Then the thing wearing Elena's face stood up and I saw that her feet weren't quite touching the ground. You're too late, it said again, and this time its voice was layered with dozens of other voices, all speaking the same words at slightly different speeds. You're too late, you're too late, you're too late. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks and broken plastic. The lights in the building flickered once and went out completely, plunging us into darkness. In the silence that followed, Jake and I stumbled toward the exit, using our dying headlamps to navigate. Behind us, I could hear Elena's voice. All of Elena's voices calling out in a horrible chorus. "Help me! Please help me! Don't leave me alone!" We made it to the parking lot and didn't stop running until we reached Jake's truck. He gunned the engine and we drove toward town, neither of us speaking until we reached the highway. "What do we tell them?" Jake asked finally. I stared out at the forest rushing past the passenger window. "We tell them Elena Martinez is still missing." "And the thing in the station?" "That wasn't Elena Martinez." The official report stated that Elena Martinez had never been found, despite an extensive search involving multiple agencies and volunteer groups. The case remains open, though no new leads have emerged in the 5 years since her disappearance. Jake transferred to a different park the following month. I stayed at Olympic, but I've never returned to the Hoh River Trail after dark. During the day, it's just a trail through the woods, popular with tourists and day hikers. But at night, when the forest becomes something else entirely, I sometimes hear voices calling from the trees. They're always asking for help. They're always saying they're lost. And they're always using Elena Martinez's voice. The thing about working in the deep woods is that you learn to respect the darkness. You learn that there are places where the normal rules don't apply, where the forest itself can reach out and take something from you. Your sense of direction, your peace of mind, or in Elena's case, your voice. I still patrol the park, still respond to missing person reports, still do my job. But I've learned to trust my instincts when they tell me that something is wrong. I've learned that sometimes the best way to help someone is to leave them alone. And I've learned that there are worse things than being lost in the woods. Sometimes being found is worse. Last month, I received a postcard at the ranger station. No return address, no postmark, just a picture of the Hoh River Trail and a message written in Elena's handwriting. "I'm not lost anymore, but I can't find my way back." On the back, someone had written coordinates. I haven't looked them up. I don't think I ever will. Some places are better left unfound, and some voices are better left unanswered.